It was supposed to be a honeymoon, a private catamaran sailing through the Caribbean in May 2017. Somewhere in open water, something went wrong. By the time the boat returned, one of them was missing, and investigators would later say it wasn't an accident. To understand what happened on that honeymoon, we have to look at the final days before they set sail. Isabella Hellman was 41 years old. She was not defined by recklessness or escape. She was defined by intention, by curiosity, by the kind of courage that comes not from impulse, but from believing that life could still be reshaped, even in adulthood. Isabella was born in Argentina and later became a naturalized U.S. citizen. Friends described her as intelligent, self-aware, and deeply reflective. She had lived in different places, experienced different cultures, and carried herself with a grounded confidence that came from having already navigated change. She was not someone searching for identity. She knew who she was. She loved the water, not in a careless way, but in a studied, almost reverent way. Sailing was not an escape for Isabella. It was a skill, a discipline, a shared pursuit that demanded trust, planning, and cooperation. The sea to her was not chaos. It was a system, one that rewarded preparation and punished shortcuts. In the years leading up to 2017, Isabella made deliberate choices about her life. She invested in experiences rather than accumulation. She believed in movement, not as running away but as leaning forward. Travel, learning, building something that felt meaningful rather than conventional. Those who knew her spoke of her thoughtfulness, of how she listened closely, of how she noticed when people shifted moods, of how she didn't rush intimacy or decisions. She was not impulsive. She was careful. That mattered. Because the version of Isabella who stepped onto a catamaran in the spring of 2017 was not naive. She was not unaware of risk. She was not drifting. She believed she was safe. At the center of that belief was her marriage. Isabella was married to Louis Bennett, a man she had built a shared life with around sailing and travel. Together they planned voyages. Together they trained. Together they talked about routes, weather patterns, and contingencies. Their relationship, at least from the outside, appeared structured around shared purpose. A catamaran is not a casual vessel. It requires coordination, maintenance, knowledge. It is not something you take lightly into open water, which is why the plan they set into motion that May did not raise alarms. The journey was not reckless. The conditions were not extreme. This was not a storm chase or a risky crossing. It was a routine passage for people who understood what they were doing. Isabella told people she trusted where she was going. She did not disappear quietly, and then, somewhere in the Straits of Florida, something happened. Call would later be made. An explanation would later be offered. A story would later harden into record. The catamaran, Louis Bennett said, had suffered a sudden emergency, a structural failure, flooding, an accident at sea. Isabella was gone. Her body was never recovered. At first, the ocean took the blame. But investigators would soon discover that the water was not the most unstable element in this story. Because when accidents happen at sea, they leave patterns. And when stories are told under pressure, they leave fractures. And long before the case became about charges or courts, it became about something quieter and far more unsettling. The realization that Isabella Hellman did not vanish into the ocean. She vanished inside a narrative, and that narrative would not hold. Isabella Hellman did not meet Louis Bennett by chance or circumstance. Their connection formed around shared interests, travel, sailing, and a mutual belief that life could be shaped intentionally rather than inherited passively. Bennett presented himself as experienced on the water, confident, technically capable. To Isabella, who valued competence and preparation that mattered. Trust in this context was not blind. It was built on shared routines, shared planning, and shared responsibility. They married and structured much of their life around sailing. From the outside, the balance appeared even. Two adults navigating a demanding lifestyle together. But relationships built around shared pursuits can mask subtle imbalances, especially when one person controls critical knowledge or physical systems. Boats like homes concentrate power. Whoever understands the mechanics controls safety, movement, and response in moments of crisis. That dynamic would later become significant. Lewis Bennett often positioned himself as the more technically experienced sailor. He handled maintenance. He handled navigation decisions. He handled the vessel's structure and integrity. Isabella participated, but access and authority were not equal. On land, that imbalance may have felt manageable. At sea, it mattered. There were no public records of violence, no documented history of physical abuse, no restraining orders, no emergency calls that foreshadowed what would come. But absence of documentation is not absence of tension. Friends later described the relationship as intense. Sailing requires isolation, long stretches without outside input, decisions made privately, reinforced by necessity rather than discussion. Over time, that isolation can compress disagreement rather than resolve it. Isabella was not dependent in the conventional sense. She was capable, educated, independent, but shared environments can still limit options, especially when escape requires cooperation. In the months before May 2017, nothing outward suggested danger. No warnings were issued. No alarms raised. Plans continued. Preparations were made. The voyage that would take them into the Straits of Florida was discussed calmly and methodically. That calm would later become part of the mystery, because when investigators examined what happened next, they did not find evidence of panic. They did not find frantic decision-making or chaotic error. What they found was something more controlled and more troubling. After the incident, Lewis Bennett would describe a sudden structural failure. Collision. Water entering the vessel rapidly. He claimed Isabella was lost in the chaos as he fought to save the boat. But accidents at sea leave debris. They leave damage patterns. They leave timelines that align with physics. And Bennett's account, when measured against expert analysis, began to strain. Small details did not sit right. The type of damage he described did not match the damage observed. The rate of flooding did not align with the vessel's design. The decisions he claimed to have made raised questions rather than answers. Investigators did not immediately accuse. They listened. They documented. They reconstructed. Because at this stage, the case was still balanced on uncertainty. Was this a tragic maritime accident? Or was it something else? Something shaped not by weather or chance but by human choice? As experts examined the vessel and timelines were rebuilt, the investigation shifted quietly but decisively. What had once centered on the ocean began to center on behavior, on access, on control, on motive that did not announce itself loudly, but lingered beneath the surface. And with every inconsistency uncovered, the margin for coincidence narrowed. By the time authorities looked beyond the water, one fact became increasingly clear. Whatever happened to Isabella Hellman did not begin with the sea. It began long before the catamaran ever left shore. The account Lewis Bennett gave to authorities was simple, at least on the surface. He said the catamaran struck something in the water during the night, that the hull was compromised. That water began rushing in faster than he could manage. He described frantic efforts to stabilize the vessel, to locate Isabella, to deploy safety measures. By the time he realized she was gone, He claimed the situation was already irreversible. See, accidents do happen. But investigators are trained to separate what sounds plausible from what can be proven. From the beginning, maritime experts noted that the Straits of Florida are heavily traveled, closely monitored, and well-charted. Collisions leave evidence. Hull breaches leave patterns. Sudden flooding leaves specific signatures inside the vessel, on the waterline, within the structure itself. When the catamaran was examined, those signatures were missing. The damage present did not align with a high-impact collision. The integrity of the hull did not support the rate of flooding Bennett described. The vessel's design, built for redundancy, should have allowed time for distress signals or coordinated evacuation. No such signals were recorded. No emergency call. No Mayday transmission. No indication that Bennett attempted to contact nearby vessels or authorities before abandoning ship. That absence mattered. Investigators reconstructed the timeline carefully, anchoring each claim against physical reality. They analyzed the boat's structure. They consulted naval architects. They compared Bennett's statements with expert testimony about how such vessels behave under stress. Each reconstruction produced the same conclusion. The sequence Bennett described did not fit. Then there was the issue of survival. Bennett was found alive. He had managed to escape the sinking vessel. He had time to deploy a life raft. He had the presence of mind to gather supplies. He survived conditions that, according to his own account, should have been chaotic and disorienting. Isabella did not. Investigators did not rush to label intent. Instead, they focused on probability, on control, on opportunity, and on the moments before the sinking. Evidence showed no sudden storm, no rogue wave, no external hazard consistent with catastrophic failure. What experts did identify were indications of internal compromise, damage inconsistent with accidental impact and more consistent with deliberate action. Testimony later explained how weakening certain structural components could produce flooding while leaving outward signs minimal. This was not speculation. It was engineering. As the investigation continued, Bennett's statements shifted subtly. Details changed. Emphasis moved. Certain explanations became less firm over time. These were not dramatic contradictions, but cumulative ones. Small deviations that, when stacked, altered the narrative. Investigators also examined behavior after the incident. They noted delays. They noted selective detail. They noted what Bennett emphasized and what he did not. Most telling was the lack of urgency in certain moments where urgency would be expected. Not panic, not desperation, but control. The case no longer centered on whether the catamaran sank. It centered on why it sank, and whether Isabella Hellman's disappearance was the result of chance or design. By the time federal authorities completed their analysis, the investigation had crossed a threshold. What began as a maritime incident was now being examined as a potential homicide at sea. Isabella's absence was no longer explained by water alone. It was explained by evidence. And with that shift came consequences that would follow Bennett back to shore, into courtrooms, into expert testimony, and into a reckoning that no amount of ocean could wash away. The shift from investigation to prosecution did not happen overnight. Federal authorities moved deliberately, aware that cases involving deaths at sea carry unique burdens of proof. There was no crime scene to return to, no body recovered, no eyewitness beyond the surviving spouse. What existed instead was a structure of evidence, technical, behavioral, and forensic, built piece by piece over time. In 2017, Louis Bennett was formally charged in connection with Isabella Hellman's death. The charge reflected the limits and realities of the case. Prosecutors did not allege premeditated murder beyond what could be proven. Instead, they focused on responsibility, on recklessness, on actions that, taken together, led directly to Isabella's death. The case did not hinge on spectacle, it hinged on explanation. In court, expert witnesses laid out the findings calmly and precisely. Naval engineers explained how the damage to the catamaran could not be reconciled with Bennett's account. Investigators detailed the inconsistencies in his statements. Prosecutors showed how opportunity, control, and knowledge of the vessel converged in ways that could not be dismissed as coincidence. There were no dramatic outbursts, no cinematic confessions, no moment designed for headlines, just a methodical dismantling of the accident narrative. Faced with the weight of the evidence, Bennett entered a guilty plea to involuntary manslaughter. The plea acknowledged responsibility without requiring a trial that would stretch the case further without offering Isabella's family anything more concrete. The court accepted the plea, and Bennett was sentenced to prison. The sentence was finite. The loss was not. For Isabella Hellman's family, the outcome brought accountability, but not answers to every question. There would be no recovery of her remains, no final place to visit. The ocean had taken that possibility with it. What remained was a legal record that recognized what happened, that mattered. Because without it, Isabella's death might have remained classified as a maritime accident, another entry in a long list of unexplained disappearances at sea. Instead, the case stands as a reminder that even in places without walls or witnesses, evidence still speaks. Isabella Hellman was 41 years old. She was a professional, partner, a woman who believed in building a life through shared plans and shared trust. Her story has since been cited in discussions about domestic violence, coercive control, and the unique vulnerabilities present in isolated environments. It has been referenced in legal training on maritime investigations, highlighting how technical analysis can reveal intent even when circumstances seem opaque. Most of all, her case undoes a quiet truth: that danger does not always announce itself, that isolation can amplify imbalance, and that accountability does not require a body. Only truth, persistence, and the refusal to accept easy explanations. Isabella Hellman did not vanish. She was taken. And the law, imperfect as it may be, acknowledged that reality. Justice doesn't always arrive quickly. The next case is on your screen now. I'll see you in the next one.